We have time for a few questions. Please raise your hand and we'll come to you.
In your opinion, is the current situation on academic campuses a continuation of the influence of the Frankfurt School or a perversion of it?
A continuation. I mean, the Frankfurt School, for people who don't know anything about Frankfurt School philosophy, is a group of philosophers in the 1920s in Germany who were expatriates. They moved to the United States and basically infiltrated American universities with an ideology that suggested, they realized, the Frankfurt School, they realized that Marxism, when Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital, what he was trying to do was describe how he thought society was going to work. It was actually descriptive, not necessarily proscriptive. It was, here's what's going to happen. He thought class warfare would eventually break out and destroy the capitalist infrastructure. When that didn't happen, World War I basically dissuaded the international left of this because there was no class uprising to start World War I. It turned out that poor French people were happy to fight poor German people, and all of them were happy to fight poor Russian people. So when that fell apart, what the Frankfurt School decided is, in order to make this change happen, we can't just wait for this change to happen, we have to change the culture. And the Frankfurt School basically decided to change the culture from the roots out. And in the 60s, what they discovered is that instead of using class, which is difficult, it's difficult to get a poor white guy to sympathize with a poor black guy, instead what they would use as a proxy is racial groups. They would use racial groups to tear down the United States and the capitalist system, suggesting that racial groups are the victims of capitalism. If we can just pose a racial group against a racial group, then that, and mix in a little bit of socialism in there, we'll end up with a more civilized world. Right? And the Soviet Union actually pushed this message in the 60s when it would put out propaganda about how the United States was racist. Right? Not how the United States was rich and poor. They didn't talk about income inequality. They talked about how the U.S. was racist and the Soviet Union was a wonderful place for people of all races, when in reality it was just a crap hole for people of all races. Yes, the Frankfurt School, which was led by people like Herbert Marcuse, it was very influential. I don't believe the full-scale conspiracy theory that everybody was taken over by them, but I think that influential thinkers do have influence beyond just the people who read their books. I mean, there's a wave that moves out. And in academia, there's no question that people who don't even know they've been influenced by Frankfurt School ideas have been influenced by Frankfurt School ideas. Just as if you ask most Democrats, you know, do you like Karl Marx, most of them will say no, even though they're buying directly into his philosophy.
I have a question about the alumni of the, say, Ivy or any goofy schools. Why don't the alumni pinch these schools off? Here is Brown University, for one example, is starting a fund drive for $2 billion. What kind of good are they going to do with that? It's because they've got a bunch of roughnecks and ingrates down there raising hell, and more $2 billion to do some more of that. Thank you very much.
So the question is basically why alumni don't do anything. There are a couple of reasons why alumni don't do anything. The first is that alumni really don't pay that much attention to what's going on at their schools. They sort of see the name on the paper and they say, I went there, it was fun, I enjoyed it, I want to see it continue to succeed. They sign a check. That's really how most alumni deal with it. I know my wife used to do phone banking for UCLA. This is how you got people to give. Right? You call them up, you say, you remember how great your experience was at UCLA? We're still doing that for thousands of kids. Give us some money. That's how most alumni actually give. The second reason is that there is a bit of self-interest attached to alumni giving in certain industries, meaning I went to Harvard Law School. Harvard Law School is, depending on who you look at, either the first or second best law school in the nation. Right? It's Harvard and Yale, and they always battle it out. If I'm somebody who went to Harvard Law School, then I would prefer that for the next 30-odd years, when I plop down that credential, people say, ooh. Right? If Harvard were to drop in the college rankings, in the law school rankings, down to 20, it's not nearly as impressive that I went there. So there's a bit of self-interest attached to the continuing prominence of your school, and so people tend to give for that reason as well. In other words, the real question, and this is a question more broadly, is why people don't why people let other interests trump ideology, and that's one that, and philosophy of life, and that's, you know, that is the difficulty of American politics and politics in general, is getting people to understand that their own personal self-interest is not necessarily served by the short-term gains to be made if they're undermining the long-term foundations upon which success is based.
Well, it's clear you're definitely up on everything. I'd like to ask you a question, which I will do now. Will Hillary Clinton be indicted?
Will Hillary Clinton be indicted? Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, but I'm going to go no. And the reason I'm going to say no is because the justice system is entirely corrupt at the top levels on behalf of Democrats. And Dinesh D'Souza will spend time in prison, but Hillary Clinton will spend no time in prison. David Petraeus will end up having to make a settlement with the government. Hillary Clinton will not. My indicator, by the way, that she's not going to be indicted is that today Jay Carney came out and said Obama was rooting for Hillary, right, which is the first real indicator that Obama is backing Hillary in the race. He's not going to endorse her full scale before South Carolina, but even that kind of small signal. The real question now is whether the FBI's investigation is so far that no one can stop them, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Listen, I hope she's indicted for purposes of justice and, yes, of politics, because I think that she is poised to be one of the most damaging. She's already one of the most damaging politicians in American history. She's the worst Secretary of State ever. But beyond that, she's poised to be the second worst president in American history if she doesn't get indicted. So I'm rooting the same as everybody else for her to get indicted. I don't trust the Loretta Lynch Justice Department to do actual justice. They're too busy cracking down on the Ferguson Police Department.
Hi. I've noticed that this new development with language like safe spaces, for instance, and trigger warnings has taken on a different kind of jargon than previous revolutionary movements. It's really therapeutic, and it's operating on an emotional level. And it seems to be resonating with kids even at the high school and elementary level. I try to talk to my nieces and nephews. It's really evident. There doesn't seem to be a foot